everyone, it's Caroline, Director of Marketing at Siege Media, and today I'm going to cover some author bio tips and examples for effective expertise, authority, and trust, or EAT. So first up, right at the top, I should say that author bios don't directly correlate to good EAT. It's something you might want to consider just for great user experience, especially if you're in those your money, your life topics. But at a blanket, if you just want to improve your traffic and improve your EAT score, author bios aren't going to be the bullet that does it for you. But if you feel like you have a really solid readership and you have a dedicated writing staff, author bios might be something you want to consider. So I'm going to go through some different formats and examples that I've seen and recommended to our clients. So the first one is just a general company byline. So this is something that some companies will implement because they have a dedicated writing staff, but maybe they are too worried to associate different posts with actual team members because they have questions like, what if that team member were to leave the company? Do we suddenly lose all of that equity that we've built with the readership with this one team member? What happens if there's churn on our writing staff? And I understand that from just an internal perspective. So I do see some companies implement, like Lexington Law, a byline that just says the company name. So that is an option if you want to do that internally as a byline. It does run the risk of just looking really repetitive on your blog roll. So you'll just see the company name listed, 30 times in a row. And in the end, is it really doing an effective job at being a true author bio? Maybe not. But if you still want to just get some brand recognition on the page, it's not a bad idea to go. And then maybe you'll revisit that in a year and you have a stronger writing staff that's more established and you can switch that button to then have it be a name of a person versus your company, and you already have the UX and design set up. So it's a pretty relatively easy switch to make. So that's one option you can try for an author bio. The next one is just fully embracing company bios on your content. So I really like what Buffer does. Every single person who writes a blog post, it gets attributed to them with a nice little headshot, their name. You can also include features like their title at the company. So the full company bio is a great way to attribute that content to the person. And then also it really shows that content is important across the whole company. Something I really like about Buffer is that you have basically everybody evangelizing content, from the CEO to somebody in HR to a content marketer, just all across the board. Everybody can contribute to the blog and be recognized. So that's really nice. I also really like with Buffer that they are doing author bios that are just really well branded. So you'll see the photography is very similar in the headshots. It's using different colored backgrounds so that it really pops, but not being super obtrusive and distracting from the rest of the content. So overall, it's just a really nice, well-designed, well thought out author bio. Another thing to consider with the full author bio is to go the author headshot and name at the top, and then a much more in-depth bio at the bottom. Fundera does a really good job at this, where they have the name of the author at the top with a little headshot. And then if you scroll to the bottom of the post, there's a full bio with more detail, roughly 2 to 3 sentences, explaining why this person is an expert on the topic. So if you want to do that 1-2 punch of having a much more detailed author bio, consider putting that at the bottom so that you're not adding this large block of text right under the headline and distracting people from the introduction of your actual copy. Another author bio that I really like is the reviewed by or edited by author bio. So I've seen this a lot in medical or finance industries. Again, those industries where your money, your life is really important. The ones that do it really well are now implementing basically a double byline, where you'll have the byline of the original writer, but you'll also have the byline of whoever reviewed or edited that content. On Very Well Fit, you can see an example where it has the original writer and there's a nice little hover feature where you can still see their full bio. And then you'll see it's been reviewed by a doctor or some expert in the space to just add more credibility. And that's a great way also to passively communicate your editorial process. So I know a lot of times people will wonder about ghostwriting and who actually wrote this blog post. And In order to scale content marketing, a lot of times brands have to rely on either outside agencies like ourselves or a team of freelance writers. And of course, you still want to hire subject matter experts, but a good way to scale content at a reasonable cost might be to hire a freelance writer, but have your in-house data scientist or your in-house CMO or in-house veterinarian look at the content that that writer is producing at a first draft, and then you can put both of those bylines attributed to the work. So it's a great way to instill more trust that I'm seeing more and more in these kind of author bios being represented. The next one I mentioned already, a kind of ghost writing byline. So you might also want to consider when you're hiring freelance writers or an agency, like, do you really want to do an author bio with that person's name, or can you attribute it to somebody else at the company? I'm not against ghost writing. People tend to frown upon it. I think it has a negative connotation in some sense, but if I were against it, I'd basically be out of a job as a writer. So definitely think about internally, what would an author bio look like if you're mostly hiring freelance or outside writers? Do you want to do, again, like the reviewed by or edited by? Are you comfortable just having it attributed to somebody internally at the company? And then the final author bio is no author bio. If there is just not a good case for getting one set up, you don't have the resources to implement it properly, you know that as a company, you're not going to be able to maintain it long term, that is totally fine. You don't have to do an author bio if it just doesn't make sense for your brand. Maybe revisit it next year, especially if you're in an industry where, again, those your money, your life topics aren't really what you play in, or you can find other ways to improve your expertise, authority, trust. I really like a study by Lily Ray that talks about areas that are not an author bio that you can look to improve your EAT that are probably a lot more effective. So it's totally fine to not have an author bio on your brand content. That is also an acceptable route. So I hope these examples were helpful. If you're deciding if you want to do an author bio or not, don't forget to leave a comment and subscribe.